Hi, good morning, friends. Thanks for joining Faith Free Will Baptist Church in Chandler's online worship experience. We have a great service lined up today. Our praise and worship team leaders are going to bring music from their homes, and Pastor Daniel's going to bring us a great message of hope and faith. So stay tuned, and feel free to share this video with your friends and family so they can join us as well. We are so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Take my pain away. I am trying to understand how to walk this weary land. Make straight the paths that crooked lie. Oh Lord, before these feet of mine. Oh Lord, before these feet of mine. When my world is shaking, heaven stands. When my heart is breaking, I never leave your hands. When you walked upon the earth, you healed the broken, lost and hurt. I know you hate to see me cry. One day you will set all things right. Yeah, one day you will set all things right. When my world is shaking, heaven stands. When my heart is breaking, I never leave your hands. Your hands, your hands that shape the world are holding me. They hold me still. Your hands that shape the world are holding me. They hold me still. When my world is shaking, heaven stands. When my heart is breaking, I never leave you. When my world is shaking, heaven stands. When my heart is breaking, I never leave. I never leave your hands.
Hey, Faith Church family, before we continue with our worship, I just want to share with you a few encouraging updates. And number one is that behind me, the makings of Stepping Stone 2 in our 5 Stepping Stone plan is coming together. We are making way for our worship team to come and record worship music together here at our facility in our gym. putting a lot of protocols in place, keeping everyone spread out. And so that's our next step. That's step 2. And if you haven't seen the update that we sent out about our 5 stepping stone plan of easing back into our in-person gatherings, I hope that you'll check that out. We'll put the link for that in a comment so you can go and watch that later and see our full thinking on the whole plan. And listen, I know that some of you are wanting to get back to in-person gatherings as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, and know that I am with you. Like, nobody wants to get back to gathering in person more than me, your pastor. I desperately want to be able to bring everyone together. But I'm asking you to walk out 1 Corinthians 8:9 with me, which says that we should not allow our freedom to become a stumbling block to those who are weak. And in this current scenario, this current setting, those who are weak could literally be weak. Those who physically are ill, or physically their immune system is weakened. We don't want to do anything that would put them at risk. And so we're going to do everything we can to walk as slowly and cautiously for the care of our people during this time. And so if we could just pour out extra measures of grace and patience right now, it would be a huge blessing, not only to me, but to our congregation. Satan would love nothing more than for us to become impatient, frustrated, divided in this time. And so the good news is that step 2 is starting to happen. And it's happening because of equipment that was made possible through a grant, but also that grant had to be coupled with an investment from us. And so your generosity made that possible. And so not only are we able to have the makings of step 2 going, but this will also make it possible for us eventually to move into step 4, when we can have in-person gatherings here in our gym. And that's possible because God has provided, not only through that grant, but through your generosity. And I continue to be amazed at how generous you are, how faithful you have been to give. And last week I shared with you that we made budget for the month of April. And honestly, my faith is not always what it ought to be. And I'm just going to be real with you. There's a little voice in the back of my head that was like, well, if you tell them that you made budget for April, is that going to make them feel a little less compelled to give? Because, hey, the church made it through that month. Maybe the church is doing okay. But God overcame that hesitation, that doubt in my mind. And last weekend was one of our best giving weekends of the year so far. And that's just a testimony to how good God is being to you and how good God is being through you. And so thank you so much. I appreciate your generosity. Many of you have made the switch to giving online by going to faithandchandler.com/give, using the Venmo app, or texting in to give. And of course, some of you are mailing your gift in. So thank you so very much. Lastly, before we continue, I just wanted to share with you that I know that right now, it's not only a challenging time for our church, but it's a challenging time for families, for businesses. Some of you went back to work this week, or you opened up your businesses again, and there are a whole lot of things that you have to walk through. I know that for families, there were trips that were planned, occasions that you were looking forward to that you're having to cancel or to change them up. And know that I'm just praying that God gives us all extra grace and wisdom in this time. One of the things that we would normally be doing right now is we would be celebrating graduations. We would be going to graduation ceremonies or gathering for graduation parties and showing those who are graduating from college or from high school or maybe even kindergarten how proud we are of them. And we're not going to be able to do that in the way that we normally would. And Hannah Pro, who is one of our worship leaders who has contributed so much during this time of helping us have worship by recording music from her home, she is a senior this year, and she's a 2020 graduate. And so Pastor Eric was able to sit down with her and talk to her about what it's been like to be a part of the class of 2020 in the middle of a quarantine. And I hope that as God has been good to her, that it'll be an encouragement and blessing to you, whatever your situation might be, whatever things you're having to replan or figure out. May you see that God has been good in the middle of all of this. Blessings to you. I continue to pray for you. I hope to see you soon.
What has it been like to navigate COVID-19 as a senior in high school?
It has had its pros and cons, most definitely. Whenever we first heard that everything went down, we were super excited. Just because as a senior, you get really bad senioritis, so you're like, I just want to be done. And then as the weeks went on, it just became more apparent that it probably wasn't going to get better. And as class president, like my principal and the teachers and stuff have been reaching out to me about what to do about graduation. And that has been really difficult to navigate, trying to figure out what's the best for our entire class and trying to get opinions from everybody. And we've kind of been planning 2 graduations because we were already on track to planning like an in-person graduation for like normal. And then we also needed to plan a virtual one just in case. And we're about to vote on 2 different options, one being a virtual, which we've basically got everything for, but it's weird because you're not actually there, and the graduation is really only for us. So it's like, I mean, I guess it's for like parents too, but like that's mostly what we're thinking of. We're thinking about being with our classmates graduating, and so it's weird because they're gonna like put like just our pictures up, and all the speeches are gonna be pre-recorded. And if I have to give a speech, I don't want to give a speech to nobody. So I think a lot of people are leaning towards wanting to wait to graduate so that we can at least do it in person, even if nobody else can be there. And just trying to figure out what everybody wants has probably been the biggest hardship for that. But on the bright side, we don't have to take finals, and we're done with school.
So do you feel like you feel a sense of closure with like your chapter of being a high school student coming to an end, even though you never really had that last day?
I mean, for me, I feel like it was different because I've talked to a few people and they say that they don't really feel that way, but I do, just because like as a senior, I already felt a little disconnected from everybody, because whenever you're a senior, you don't see as many people. Like you don't see the freshmen or the sophomores. I rarely saw juniors. And so it was like I really only saw the people that I had classes with, and I only went to school for half a day. So, I mean, I was prepared for it anyway, and I wasn't really looking forward to graduation as much as everybody else was, just because of some things that happened last year, because my cousin passed away and we were going to graduate together. So I was already kind of like, I don't really want to do this. And so in a way, it's been really difficult, but being able to kind of wait and reflect on the last 4 years, and help in that way has helped me to be okay with graduating, because I wasn't really ready for it.
How do you feel like God has used this time in your life?
In many different ways. It's been a roller coaster of emotions. I'm a very emotional person, and a lot of it has just been deciding on what to do about college, because it was already really chaotic before this, and now it's kind of like, well, money is a lot more of an issue now, and also my safety, whether or not I'll even be able to go to the campus, is a big thing. So having to like overcome all of that and really, really pray about it, has been.
So you feel like God has called you to perhaps lead music one day. How did you decide on where you're going? Why do you feel like that is going to be a good fit for you?
That's a really good question, actually. I have always struggled with that. Going into freshman year, I was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, all of that. And through the past 4 years, God has continually tried to like just teach me little things there. But the biggest thing that he's taught me is that, like, ultimately, I have desires. I have desires in my heart, and he knows that. And the truth is that it doesn't matter what I do, as long as I'm allowing him to lead me in that way, and I'm doing it for him. Sorry, I'm going to cry. So ultimately, I feel the closest to God whenever I am worshiping and music. I wanted to be able to give that to other people and teach other people that. And I don't know what that looks like right now, just because I think that there are so many different things that can happen. I was planning on possibly attending a Christian college in Nashville, but as this whole thing has gone on, it doesn't look like that will be happening for me because of money and because of the virus and everything. And I thought that I was going to be a lot more distraught about it because I really wanted to go. But the fact that I know that no matter what I do, as long as I'm doing it for God, really helps comfort me. It's still really stressful though, because you're told that you don't need to have everything figured out, yet you still have the pressure that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still kind of dealing with that, with the whole societal part of it, and trying to go back to God for advice. I just didn't imagine it going this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's kind of what's beautiful about God, is that we plan all of these things, but the truth is that no matter what happens, like, it's always going to be good, and you're always going to be okay. But it may not be what you think it is.
Well, Hannah, you're doing a great job rolling with the punches, and we at Faith Church are so happy for you to be graduating, and we congratulate you on being in the class of 2020. It's awesome.
Come out of hiding, you're safe here with me. There's no need to cover what I already see. You've got your reasons, but I hold your peace. You've been on lockdown and I hold the key. 'Cause I loved you before you knew what was love, and I saw it all. Still I chose the cross, and you were the one that I was thinking of when I rose from the grave. Now rid of the shackles, my victory is yours. I tore the veil for you to come close. There's no reason to stand at a distance anymore. You're not far from home. I'll be your lighthouse when you're lost at sea. And I will illuminate everything. No need to be frightened by intimacy. No, just throw off your fear and come running to me. Oh, 'cause I loved you before you knew it was love, and I saw it all. Still I chose the cross, and you were the one that I was thinking of when I rose from the grave. Now rid of the shackles, my victory is yours. I tore the veil for you to come close. There's no reason to stand at a distance anymore. You're not far from home. You're not far from home. So keep on coming. And know as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. And know as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. And know as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. And know as you run, what hindered
I ran up to Lowe's the other day to get some stuff for a project I was working on for Nicole, and the place was the busiest I had ever seen it. It's not quite as busy right now that I'm here, but it seems like during this quarantine, everybody, while they've been sheltering in place, staying at home, has started several projects at home. And actually, you ladies don't know this, but the reason that Governor Holcomb is opening things as quickly as he is because all of us husbands have begged him to stop the quarantine so that we can get some rest from all the projects that you're having us do. But in all seriousness, when we're at home and there's a little bit more margin in our schedules and maybe a little bit more margin because of a stimulus check, there's a lot of projects that we look around and we say, well, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should start working on that. And I can remember when we bought our home and we bought a foreclosure and we remodeled it, and there was a lot of work. We spent several months remodeling this place, and I remember talking to some of you as we were kind of getting near the completion, and I would say like, yeah, we're almost done, or we're gonna get to move in, I'll be so glad to be finished. And you would always say things in response like, well, when you own a home, you're never done. Or yeah, you just think you're finished. It's really just the start. And the truth is that we're always looking around and seeing things that need to be done. That even at home, even at the place when we're at rest or where we belong, when we look around, there's always work to be done. And we're never really totally at rest. We're never really totally home. And that thing that's within us that is constantly searching for home, constantly searching for where we belong, we see that throughout Scripture. And it's actually a major theme in the Bible. And there are groups of people that they experienced literal exile in the sense that they were taken from their home and placed in a completely different home. And of course that didn't feel like home. And so while we jump into this series on exiles, and maybe you don't really understand what the word exile means, I hope that you'll see that it's incredibly helpful for us to realize why it is that we don't feel at place, or why it is we don't feel at home in this current situation. And the Bible Project has put an incredible video together that kind of lays out what does it mean to be an exile, and what's the theme of being an exile in Scripture all about.
There's something about being home, where everything's just right. We're surrounded by people we love and trust. There's a feeling of stability and safety.
And while some people get to experience this kind of home, many do not. Others might even be forced to leave their home and go live in a foreign land. We call this going into exile.
Yeah, in exile, everything is disorienting. You're in the unknown.
And in the story of the Bible, this is where the ancient Israelites found themselves, conquered by Babylon, living in exile far from their homeland.
And so they had to ask themselves, how did we end up here? And is there any hope of going home?
And the whole story of the Bible is designed to address those very questions.
The whole story? Really?
Yeah, go back to the first pages of the Bible. Where does humanity live?
Okay, they live in this really sweet garden. They're home.
And they're there on one condition, that they trust and follow God's one command, and they don't. And so the consequence is banishment from the garden.
Ah, they're sent into exile.
Exactly. And so this story has been designed to set you up for Israel's story. How they were given the gift of the promised land and were able to stay there on one condition, that they be faithful to the terms of their covenant relationship with God.
They didn't, and they were sent into exile.
And if you still don't see the parallel between exile from the garden and exile from Israel, think about this. In Genesis, humanity's exile led up to the story about the building of what city?
Oh yeah, Babylon. The same place the Israelites are sent.
But that's not the end of either story. In the first Babylon, God called Abraham to leave and travel to the promised land. And that story was designed to give hope to the Israelites currently living in the later Babylon.
Now eventually, they do get to leave and travel back to their promised homeland.
And when they did, it wasn't home sweet home. Oppressive empires were still ruling over them, and the people kept acting in the same corrupt ways as their ancestors. And so the biblical prophets said that exile wasn't actually over.
How could they think they were still in exile when they're at home?
Yeah, this is really important. In the Hebrew scriptures, Israel's Babylonian exile became an image of something more universal. It's that feeling of alienation and longing for something more, no matter where you live.
Yeah, I can relate to this. I have a great home, but it's situated in a world scarred with pain and broken relationships, death, and tragedy, done by others, but also done by me.
And so in the Bible, exile is the human condition. We all keep repeating this pattern of human corruption leading to a Babylon that we can't escape. And it doesn't matter where you live, we are all longing for a better home.
Now, Israel's scriptures held out hope that one day God would send a king who would rescue the world from all of the Babylons we've created.
And after many generations pass, we meet this Israelite named Jesus of Nazareth. He wandered about with no home, announcing the great restoration, that reality of home that Israel and all humanity has been looking for.
Yeah, Jesus really cared about people who didn't have homes. He welcomed in the stranger. He said God's love is shown when you invite in the outcast and throw parties for people who don't have a place to belong.
Jesus also claimed that Israel and all humanity had lost its way, that our self-centeredness drives us to create false homes based on status and power, and these inevitably exclude others. We live in an exile of our own making. But Jesus said the true way home is one of weakness, of service, and of forgiveness. And then Jesus went into exile alongside us to show us the true way home.
Which is?
Well, Jesus said he is the way. His life and self-giving love proved more powerful than humanity's failure. He opened up a pathway to our real home. And as Jesus' followers committed themselves to him, they discovered this new way of being human. They believed that the real return from exile had begun. And so they would call themselves sojourners or wanderers.
Oh, right. They would say things like, the world isn't our home, and we're citizens of heaven.
And so Jesus' followers remain exiles as they wait for that day when Jesus returns to transform this world into a true home.
For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to be with us in person, this is the hymnal that we use, that we sing out of, that we read scriptures together out of, scripture readings out of together. And there are songs for every occasion in this hymn book. There are songs about Easter, songs about Christmas, songs for times of celebration, songs for times of grieving. There's even O Canada in here because some of our churches that use this hymn book are in Canada, and it's an appropriate song for them to sing at times, like Star Spangled Banner is in there for us Americans. And this is the hymn book that we use in our church, in our in-person gatherings. And we also have a hymn book in our Bible that is from the Jews. And it has all of the songs, not all the songs, but many of the songs that they would sing in their gatherings in the temple, or when they got together in synagogue, or when they traveled together, or when they gathered together as a family. There were songs that they would sing to remember how good God had been to them. But there are a couple of songs from the difficult time period when they were put into captivity by the Babylonians. When they were taken into captivity, they were force-marched out of Israel into Babylon. When the Babylonians conquered people, they knew that one of the very best ways to keep nations from rising up against them was to resettle the people into their land, and to resettle people from other conquered lands into the land that they had conquered. And by just kind of mixing everyone together, they kind of erased the identity and culture of those people so that they couldn't rise up and rebel against the Babylonians. And for many of the Jews in particular, they were resettled into these large agricultural centers, these places where there were these huge farms, and they lived in like shanties and in tents, and they worked on these farms to keep the Babylonian economy going and to keep the huge Babylonian army fed. And it's during this time of they're in exile in Babylon, they're working on these farms, that Psalm 137 is written in that setting. And they come down to the river, perhaps after a long day of working in the fields, and maybe like you would come down to the river to walk on a long day after work, just to kind of relax for a little bit. The Jews come down, and they brought some instruments. Perhaps they're going to sit around a campfire and sing. And there's some Babylonians there who say to them, hey, would you sing us one of the songs from your homeland? And that's the setting that we find in Psalm 137. And I want you to hear the Jews' response to that moment in this setting, sitting at the river. when they're asked to sing one of the songs of their homeland. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it. For there those who carried us away captive asked us a song, and those who plundered us requested us to be mirthful or to be happy, saying, sing us songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget it still. What happened is when the Jews went down to the river in that moment, and they're just kind of taking it in, and they're having a moment to relax, and these Babylonians ask them to sing a song from Zion, they break down and cry. They weep because they're reminded of the things that they have lost. You know, and last week I talked to you about we have this love affair. We love the idea of a fair world where everything is as it should be. And what I was encouraging you to do is not to hold on to that because it can make us bitter when things don't go like we want. But I hope that nobody took away from that I was saying that we should just pretend like nothing happened. Right now we're in a cultural moment where there's a lot for us to mourn, a lot that's been lost, a lot that we have missed out on. My son is graduating from kindergarten, and he's not going to have a kindergarten graduation. And I don't think that he's really worried about it, but I kind of hate that we're not going to have that celebration. Anna, who we've interviewed for this week's online worship experience, she's not going to have her high school graduation. We were planning a trip to St. Louis over spring break. That didn't get to happen. I'm sure that many of you have had birthdays, anniversaries, family reunions, things that you were looking forward to, that you were planning, and it's not going to be able to happen now. For our church, there are things that we've missed out on. Not only our in-person gatherings for the last 8 weeks, but camp has been canceled, and VBS can't happen. We're not going to be able to do our annual picnic at Boonville City Lake, and I hate that we're missing out on all of those things. And it is totally normal for us to mourn the loss of those things. I think it would be completely tone deaf for us to act like, oh, it's fine. You know, yeah, we didn't get to do that, but we'll get to do this instead. And there's this push or this pull for us to be positive, encouraging in this time, which I totally understand because we need plenty of that. But we can't just pretend like nothing happened. We can't pretend like nothing has been lost. It's not natural, it's not appropriate. And what I think we see from the Jews is that it's not even wise. See what the Jews said there in verse 5 is, Lord, if I forget Jerusalem, let my hands forget the skill to play. If I'm not going to be able to play remembering Jerusalem and weeping for what we've lost, God, don't let me play the harp at all. I'm going to hang my harp up on the tree. I'd rather do that than sing as if we haven't lost something. See, the Babylonians wanted to just integrate every people that they conquered into their nation so that they couldn't rise up against them. And by doing that, every culture that they conquered, they just kind of wiped off the face of the earth, except for the Jews. The Jews were the only people that maintained their identity. And the Jews not only maintained their identity through that captivity, through that exile, they eventually returned home because they never forgot that they weren't home. And next week, we're going to look at the fact that they built homes in these places, and they sought after the flourishing of these places that they were living in, but they never forgot that they were not home. They always remembered that they weren't home. And for us to get home, for us to get back to what needs to happen, for us to get back to what's important, we can't forget about it. Because if we forget about it, we won't return to it. And if we act as if it doesn't matter, we devalue it. We've all experienced this, right? Maybe there's something you want to buy at a yard sale, you're buying off Facebook Marketplace, you're buying a used car. The first thing that you do is you pretend like you don't even really want it, right? You act like, I don't even really know why I'm looking at this, and then you point out all the things that are wrong with it, because if you walk in acting like, man, this is exactly what I've been looking for, it's in perfect condition, the person's going to be firm on their price. To get them to come down on their price, you need to act like you're not even really interested or that it has all kinds of problems. When we act as if the things that we've lost don't matter, we devalue them. And I'm sure that it would have been tempting for the Jews just to slip right into life in Babylon and put the past behind them and only be positive. But if they had done that, they would have forgotten about Jerusalem. They would have forgotten why they needed to return. And we'll never make it home if we forget that we aren't home. We'll never get back to home if we forget that we're not home. Have you ever opened up Apple Maps or Google Maps or maybe Waze? You're looking for driving directions somewhere, and somehow you accidentally put the place where you're at in as the destination. And so instead of getting directions to where you want to go, you're getting directions to where you're already at. Sometimes this happens when I'm sending a link to someone so they'll have directions to the church, and I'm at the church. So Google Maps sees that I want directions to 303 North 5th Street, but I'm at 303 North 5th Street. And so what it does is it just kind of takes me around the block, does one loop around the block, because it's confused. Why are you trying to get where you're already at? And if we think that we're already home, or we be content with where we're already at, we're just going to go in circles, and we're not really going to get anywhere. For the Jews, they had to remember they weren't home yet, and that's how they got home one day. And for believers, we have to recognize this is not our home. We have not arrived. For us to be truly home, we'll be with the Lord. We are exiles in this world. We are exiles in this life. This is not how the world was intended to be. This is not where we're supposed to end up. This is not the end. We are constantly looking for a place that's out there one day, and we should constantly weep over the brokenness of this life because we are looking for the beauty and restoration and recreation of the life to come. We're not home yet. We've got to remember that so that we can make it home one day. So the Jews, they wept for what they had lost. They wept over the fact that they were not home. And that was not only natural, it was wise. And it was for that reason that they kept their identity in the midst of Babylon. It was for that reason that they made it home one day. And you and I, we should weep for the fact that we're not home yet. There's still a work that needs to happen. There's another song in the songbook of the Jews. It's Psalm 79, and it's also written during the time of captivity. If you read the beginning of Psalm 79, it's incredibly violent. It's talking about conquering the Babylonians, crushing them. It may have been written by people in Israel as they had watched all their people be conquered or taken away or their temple be destroyed. It may have been written by people who've been carried off to Babylon. Either way, it's written by people who have seen what the Babylonians have done to Israel, and they are angry. They are mad, and they want things to be made right. They want God to deal with the Babylonians and to take care of them, to do as harshly to them as the Babylonians had done to the Israelites. But later in the song, verses 8 and 9, it says, Lord, how long will you remember our sins, and how long will you hold back your mercy? You see, the Jews recognized that the Babylonians were the ones that had conquered them, but they also recognized that it was their sin that had gotten them in this situation. They were angry at what the Babylonians had done to them, but they also admitted and they wept, they mourned, they confessed their own sin. And for believers, we recognize that we're not home yet, and we also recognize that there's a work to be done yet in us. We have not arrived spiritually. We recognize there's a brokenness in us, that we need God to work in us. And when we mourn the brokenness in us, when we recognize the need in us, it gives us the opportunity to look forward to the day that Christ is going to do this work in us. For the people in the Babylonian exile, they could weep that they had lost Jerusalem and they'd been taken out of their homeland, but they looked forward to the day when they would return. For us, we are blessed with the opportunity to weep over the brokenness and look back at the day that Christ went to the cross to conquer death, hell, sin, and the grave so that we could go home one day. We're not looking forward with hope and anticipation for him to do that one day. We look back at the fact that he's already done it. And when we weep and we mourn over our own brokenness and our own sin, the celebration of what Christ has done, what he took care of on the cross, the celebration of where we're headed one day is so beautiful. And if you remember a few weeks back, maybe it's been a few months now, that I showed you that cross diagram, that is the more we get to know our brokenness and the more we understand God's goodness, the bigger the cross is in our view. We see how big of a deal the cross is. And friend, when we mourn what we've lost, when we weep over what we've lost, when we weep over our own brokenness and our own need, when we recognize that we're exiles, we not only see that there's a place we're going one day, we get to celebrate what God has done. And so as believers, as exiles, we are constantly weeping over what we've lost, over how broken we are, over our own sin, but we're constantly celebrating what Jesus has done. And today, in the midst of this craziness, in the midst of this cultural moment, we can continue to weep over our needs, but celebrate that Christ has provided the grace that we need. We can weep over our brokenness, but celebrate that Christ has made it possible for us to be restored. And if you're still just kind of figuring this out, or you're trying to seek, or you're not really sure, know that brokenness can be restored today, that you can experience the grace of Christ today. And for believers, we can recognize on a new level, appreciate in a fresh way, that there's a brokenness in us, but that Christ has redeemed us. We can mourn our need, but also celebrate his provision. And so I hope that today, wherever you're at in your spiritual walk, and wherever you're at in this crazy moment, that you can mourn what's been lost, mourn your own brokenness, and also celebrate what Jesus has done. Father, I pray that you would bless each one who's participating in this online worship experience, Lord, that this moment would recognize that there's a brokenness in us that needs to be restored and redeemed. And Lord, that we could celebrate what it is that you have done for us. God, thank you for your goodness. Work in hearts in this moment. Help us to realize that we're not home yet. We haven't arrived, that none of us have arrived, but there is still a work that you desire to do in us. You want to take us home. We pray this in your name. Amen.
When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count as loss, and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to his blood. See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small. Love so